My God is big, so strong, so mighty. My God's plans for me goes beyond my wildest dreams. There's nothing my God cannot do. There's nothing my God cannot do. There's nothing my God cannot do.
Well, welcome to Wellness Issues. I'm your host, Chris Sylvain, and we are so excited today. It's a wonderful day to be alive, and definitely it's always great to see opportunities and new beginnings each and every day. God still does miracles. Well, we have an awesome guest for you today, one I'm always so excited to speak with. It's just so knowledgeable and understanding of so many different areas. Just as a great individual, but particularly a great leader in our time, really writing history everywhere. The ACLU, a group, and we joke about it, a group that's loved and hated by everybody for whatever reason that we can create. You know, there's always some kind of way, but really powerful, and they do so many great things to benefit the community and liberty. We have the executive director, and I know you guys all know her, and that is Miss Marjorie Esman. How are you today?
I'm fine. Thank you for that great introduction. I almost didn't recognize myself.
No, it's real. It's real, but exciting. But here we have a letter, you know, and it just kind of blew me away. And it shouldn't have, but a letter to the candidates for governor. Start us.
You know, we've got a governor's election coming up, as everybody knows, and we have 4 announced candidates, and they are doing a lot of speaking on a lot of public issues, as they should be, but none of them has said a word about one of the great problems facing Louisiana, and that is our mass incarceration crisis. You know, by now everybody knows we're the leading incarcerator in the world. It's bankrupting our state. One of the many reasons why we are in the financial mess that we're in is because we spend far more money than we need to on incarcerating our own people. And yet not a single one of these 4 people has said a single word about what they would do and what they would encourage the legislature to do to help solve this problem. And so we issued a call to them, all of them, to start talking about this issue. They still haven't. And I think it's important for the media and every community group that hosts a candidates forum, every person who's in a position to ask them a question, to make them address this issue. Because if we don't know where they stand on this issue, how on earth can we know who to vote for?
I love it. I love the strategy. I love the approach, because unless we hem them in, they'll weasel out.
That's right. And if you don't make them talk, then you don't know what their positions are. And, you know, it's a hugely important issue. It's an enormous chunk of our state budget. It affects a disproportionate number of our people. It's tied in with absolutely every other aspect of life in the state of Louisiana, and yet they're acting like it's not there.
Them and literally all other politicians. It's hard to find a needle in a haystack to find anybody that's going to seriously address the issue.
Well, that's true, you know, because it's ugly and it's tough and it's controversial, and people would rather not talk about it. But given the fact that we're looking to elect the person, and you know, it's going to be a man, because that's all who's announced, okay, who is going to lead this state for the next 4 and maybe 8 years, we have to demand that they talk about this problem. We can't let them, you know, they're saying, I don't mean to suggest that they're not talking about important issues. They are talking about important issues. They're talking about job creation. They're talking about public accountability. They're talking about, you know, health care. They're talking about a lot of other things that are extremely important, but they're not talking about this. And they need to add the criminal justice system to their list of topics because people have a right to know.
Okay. let's look at this in proportion. Obviously, to young black men, it is everything. It is hey, who cares about health care? Who cares about schools, budgets, crime, anything? To young black men, the key is not going to jail.
Well, but schools, crime, budgets, health care, it's all tied in. It's all of a piece. You know, we've got the school to prison pipeline. Everybody knows about that. We've got issues with accessibility, access to health care. You know, if you can't be employed, you can't get on an employer's health plan. It's difficult even with Obamacare to get your own. If you're incarcerated, the rules are all. They're not separate. They're all of a piece.
No, agreed. 100% with you. But to a young 17-year-old African American male, you know what I mean? Just in high school, dropped out of high school or whatever.
Pushed out, maybe.
Yeah, literally pushed out, school to prison pipeline. That is his issue. But to people who are not young African American males, the further they get away from that group, the less that they're thinking about it, unless they're part of the group that's creating the system.
Perhaps. On the other hand, when 2 days ago, LSU announced plans for what amounts to bankruptcy because the state can't afford to give them money.
Okay.
Why is it that the state can't afford to give LSU money? There are a lot of reasons, and you know, the incarceration problem is only one of many. You know, and I don't want to suggest that if we solved that, then all of a sudden we'd close the budget gap. But certainly there would be more money available for LSU and for the hospitals and for all the other services that are being cut if we could be more sensible about our criminal justice system. So all of those LSU alumni who don't want to see their university go down the tubes, they need to be thinking about this too.
Well, I'm just looking at it as to hem them in, you know, and we agree 100% on getting people to understand the importance of mass incarceration. I guess my thinking is the budgetary reasons is a good argument. I think it is. I think it's an excellent argument. But if the system of mass incarceration follows slavery, follows segregation, then it's not an expense item to those who are comfortable creating the system and allowing it to go forth. It's an asset. And, in fact, they want to spend the money.
Well, but I don't disagree with you. You're absolutely right. On the other hand, a lot of those people are the same people who also don't want to spend their tax dollars, and they need to understand that you can't have one without the other. But if you're talking about the 4 men, white men, who are seeking to lead the state of Louisiana, we have to know what they think. We have to know which side are they on. And if they want to chart a path down the middle, that's fine. What's it going to look like? We have to know. We have the right to know. And the people of Louisiana need to demand answers from them because they're not going to talk about it if we don't make them.
I'm with you. You know, we're all together. I think the big issue through the continuum of this issue of dealing with young black men and this incarceration issue, and like I would say, it's not the new Jim Crow, it's just the new slavery. You know, this paradigm of arresting them disproportionately. We were just talking about it the other day. You know, about drug use and heroin use, and it's really not mainly a black problem. It's more of a white problem than a black problem. But black folk are the only ones in jail. You know, and it just goes on and on and on and on and on. Well, but again, who's going to tell the truth if they really in their hearts, you know, like the basketball guy who owned a basketball team? I mean, you know, it's almost as if you'd have to catch him with a mic on the side.
Well, you know, I don't want to impute ill motive to anybody without evidence. I
would say this, not to interrupt you, but I would say that unless people say I'm against mass incarceration, I'm willing to work against it, it is one of the biggest problems in the world, this is totally obvious, you know, then to me, silence says everything.
You may be right, but I don't want to assume without knowing that any of these individuals harbors let's put it this way. You know, you understand how the system works. because you spent a lot of time thinking about it. And I've spent a lot of time thinking about it, and I hope I understand how the system works, not completely, but well enough to talk about it. But to people who haven't spent a lot of time thinking about it, they may not understand how the system works.
Okay.
And so I'm not going to assume ill motive to people who may simply not be as well informed as they should be if they want to lead this state.
Okay.
But regardless, I think we need to know what they don't know, what they think, what they don't think, how they see we need to make them think about it.
Okay.
And certainly, they know dollars and cents, and they know that we spend more on the Department of Corrections than we do on LSU. Or, I mean, if they don't know that, that's a simple number. Here, these are numbers. Look at them.
Right,
What does that tell you?
Right.
And regardless of whether they like the system for nefarious reasons,
Okay.
or whether they really believe, as many people do, that this is what's necessary to keep us safe from crime,
Okay.
in which case they need to be educated.
Okay.
We don't know because they won't tell us.
All right. It's a gray area. It's a gray area, and obviously we can't look into people's hearts. But I think you said something so powerfully. If they want to lead the state, then they're bound. They should be bound to be able to express. What about the concept of those who decide not to press them on the issues? So if it's only the ACLU and the sorted groups, all right, that are like-minded. In other words, that's that crowd over there. They fight about this, they fight about that. That's that constituency that we can write off anyway. That's the left, so to speak.
Right.
What about those who so-called work with groups, but still make a decision that it's a little too messy for me to touch?
But I understand what you're saying, and I want it clear that this was a call that the ACLU put out as part of a coalition of a large number of organizations. This was not just us, and I want to make sure that all of the other organizations that signed on to this get the appropriate credit for being part of this. But and there's a long list, so I'm not going to rattle them off. But you know who you are.
Right.
But there is a nationwide consensus, and it is a bipartisan consensus, that our system is badly broken. And it includes actors from the far right. And it may be that their motives are that they don't want to pay their tax dollars to support a bloated incarceration system. That might be the reason that the Koch brothers are involved. That might be the reasons that Americans for Tax Reform are involved. The ACLU and our allies have maybe different motives. But at the end of the day, if there's that broad a bipartisan consensus that in the country as a whole the system is badly broken, then it's clear that it's not just, the bleeding hearts on the left, so to speak. And again, when we're facing a $1.6 billion budget crisis, and we've got our state flagship university all but bankrupt, and this morning I read that they've announced a 50% cutback in filling new positions because they don't have the money to hire new faculty. Right. What kind of a university are we leaving our children? How can we expect our kids to get, and that's just LSU, of course, that doesn't address any of the other universities in the state who are, just as bad off or maybe worse. What are we leaving behind us? But since this is by now widely recognized across the political spectrum as a crisis, it's not enough for a candidate to say, oh, that's just those folks over there. I don't have to talk about it because that's just those folks over there. Okay. And anyway, just those folks over there are still, people with supporters who vote, and have the right to know who deserves their vote.
Got it. Great strategist, believe me. Hey, I love the strategy. Being able to build coalitions. I mean, we have to be able to build coalitions and reach across the aisle, so to speak, and grab anybody possible to deal with mass incarceration. I think we had talked about it before. Once we get there, then we can figure out the other side. But Right now we have to deal with mass incarceration. So let's look at some of those coalitions, so to speak. Let's look at the drug coalition. From one standpoint, unless we're looking at it from a moral standpoint to wipe it out totally, to end this whole idea of mass incarceration, everything else becomes unsatisfying because it doesn't deal with the root of the issue. I'll go into New York. New York decriminalized marijuana, my understanding, and the arrest rate for young African-American males went up anyway.
That could be, and if you have a system that's racially broken, the system will continue to be racially broken. I don't know what happened in New York, so I can't address the example you just cited, other than that if you say so, I'm sure it's true. We do know that in other states, Texas, for instance, when they have revised their sentencing laws across the board, marijuana and other things, crime rates have gone down, and they've been able to close prisons after having while crime rate goes down. The two of those things happen together. So we know there's a correlation between tough criminal sentencing and increasing in crime rate. We know that. Crime rate goes up with bad sentences. It's the system that feeds itself.
Well, I think the New York thing was actually overall arrest rates may have gone down, but the percentage of African Americans increased. Let's bring in a caller, and definitely we have as Marjorie Esman, Executive Director at ACLU. Line 3, Brother AJ.
Yes, I understand, police misconduct and how the police are totally out of control. And I'm not some right-wing idiot, trying to blame black people for what happens, to the young black men. But it seems as though that everybody on your station, except for Oliver Thomas, because he always talks about how he went to Richard Pryor went to the movie and he said, well, thank God for prisons. But it seems like everybody on your station has this attitude that every young black man, old black man is, the victim of police brutality when they arrested. But what I find when I see, if you already know from the media over and over, the inundation of the media sources, if you already know that these white boys are out to kill you, and if you're not doing anything, why run away? And even though you still can get killed by just just being non-combative, you still can do that. But you kind of up the chances of getting blown away by somebody who's out there who wants to kill you, because most of them white boys on the police force, they're about evening some scores about things that happen to their friends and their families by black hands. And I'm just trying to understand, where do we draw the line between defending young black men going to jail, so-called black men going to jail, and, criminality, this kind of thing, because we, in many cases, are our own worst enemy. And I'm not saying, I'm not some right-wing fanatic, but I'm just saying that a lot of this is their own fault. Everybody's not Trayvon walking around down the street, going to their father's house innocently and just drinking his little iced tea and eating his little Skittles, this kind of thing. Some people rape the grandmothers, they kill the mothers and the babies, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm just a person, and I'm very radical. I'm very left-wing. But I'm not going to, buy this whole thing about every black prisoner is a political prisoner, something that was, proposed back in the early 70s, et cetera. So could you please comment on that? Because I see this criminality as being mostly directed to our own people, this kind of thing. But the commentators on WBOK seem to have the attitude that, it's all the police's fault, except for my man, Mr. Thomas. Peace.
You raised some really good points, and I certainly don't want to suggest that, either that everybody is innocent, that crimes don't occur in our communities. Of course they do. However, I think, at least from my standpoint, what I'm talking about is the excessively harsh sentences that we have in Louisiana, where we lock people up for far longer than other states do for similar offenses. And And the theory is that that's supposed to be a deterrent, but if that were so, then we would have the lowest crime rate in the world, which we do not. So clearly, the long sentences don't solve the problem of keeping us any safer. Now, as to whether or not there are actually crimes being committed, of course there are crimes being committed. I will say this also, that much of the crime that goes on in our communities is related to the fact that we have this war on drugs. The fact is, in most businesses, if two business people have a dispute over an unpaid bill or, you ship me goods of inferior quality or whatever it may be, there's a mechanism for that. You go to court, you sue each other, and you let a judge or maybe a jury, if appropriate, figure it out. But when you're in the drug business, you can't do that. So you have to resort to your own kind of justice because the courts are not available to you. And when we have a system in which, first of all, here in this state, in New Orleans, we have a 52% unemployment rate among African American men. And that in itself is tied in with the criminal justice system. And when we have a situation in which for many people the only opportunities they can have are through illegal activities, and I'm not defending, drug dealers, but what I'm saying is that if there are no other options available to you, if you can't make a living legally, then you have to make a living illegally. And once you do that, then you lose access to the resources that are available to other people, and that feeds the violence. So I'm not saying that there isn't, also a high crime rate. There is. And there is perhaps a disproportionate crime rate, black on black crime. But that's not an excuse. That's a symptom of a bigger problem.
Brother AJ, and if I can just throw one into, I think I hear your points, and I've heard it a lot, and I'm glad you've called because I think you're speaking for a lot of people. I really think that you are, that actually agree with you. But part of all what ACLU and what we're trying to do is deal with this concept called justice. It doesn't mean that other things aren't going on. It means that if we have an unjust system, an inhumane system, everything else ends up being a part of it and because of it. If we can get justice, then everything falls into place, and that we stand on and that we believe. And your own words have said that it's an unjust system. You're just trying to describe how we live in an unjust system, to me, which is just a cop-out. If we're going to stand tall, we should believe that truth means let's have a true colorblind system the way it is. We do not have same crime, equal time. We have a system that disproportionately attacks young African American males, the same way slavery did, the same way the same way segregation did. And here we come with mass incarceration, and it's like a secret, wicked system that's hidden behind the corners of Tulane and Broad. But the truth of the matter is as bad as worse than segregation and as bad as slavery, that's ripping families and people apart for doing the same crimes that are done by every other racial group, but they're particularly targeted, just like it would be lynching or just like anything else. And your words actually made the point. But the truth of the matter is, why just cop out and deal with this patchwork principle of saying, hey, let's just step and fetch it our way and just go along with what everybody else has to say? Why not just stand for truth and justice? So I appreciate you calling, Brother AJ. You know what I mean? I don't mean to disparage you in any way. I thank you for actually bringing that point, because I think a lot of people have that point. Part of all what we're trying to do now is teach and let people know that there is such a thing as truth and there is such a thing as justice. Thank you so much.
Well, I want to make one other point, and that is that I think Brother AJ highlights the importance of what you and I really started this conversation with, which is that we have to make sure that these candidates for governor speak out on this issue, because there is a difference of opinion in the community. Not everybody sees it the same way, and we've got four men. They all want to be governor of the state. How are we going to know? How's Brother AJ going to know which one of those people best fits his idea of how the system should go forward if they won't tell him?
You hit the nail on the head. And see, the thing with mass incarceration, slavery, I hated it, but you could see it. Segregation, you hated it, but you can see it. But with mass incarceration, using the criminal justice system to sweep in communities and wrap people up for maybe crimes they're committing or not committing, but the only way we'll know that it's going on is with charts and graphs. And if people don't have the charts and graphs to see the injustice that's going on, or if they refuse to look at it, we can very well believe that these young black guys are just horrible. But so we, and I thank you guys for bringing in the charts and graphs and bringing in the truth. And that way all of the candidates are able to see, no matter what their viewpoint is, because I say it all over again, everybody's viewpoint of justice there's some differences there, but there must be some common denominators of justice.
Of course, yes, everybody's viewpoint is different. Yes, there are some common denominators, and we have to demand answers from these people who want our votes so that they can lead this state in the future. They have to tell us. Because there are differences of opinion, there are 4 individuals. They probably have 4 different opinions about what to do. We need to know. We need to know.
Now, 2 things I want to talk about. We got 4 more minutes. One, more of the strategies on how we can get not just the coalition, and not just the LC, the coalition from doing it, but bringing in, and I believe we have to bring in the churches, that's my area. I'll stand on it. We have to bring the churches in. If they claim truth and righteousness, they need to be, in fact, the extreme right wing or whatever should be the major ones that's pressing on this issue. And I think that we need to press them to press on this issue. But it's something we have talked about before again and again. How do we smoke out those that are hiding under sheets?
Well, you got to ask tough questions. And if the churches, the religious organizations are going to have governors' forums, ask the questions. Tell the members, if you're out in your community in another group, another context, and you see one of these individuals, ask the questions. If you're talking to reporters, tell the reporters, ask the questions. They're not going to answer if you don't ask.
All right.
Because they've already made it very clear that they don't want to answer, or they would have put it out on their platforms in the first place.
Yeah, you sent the letter out. It's been a whole week, huh? You haven't heard anything yet?
No, no. And also, if you look at the platforms of these 4 individuals, none of them has said anything about what they're going to do with this problem on their platforms. They're not talking about it.
If not forced, they won't.
That's right. That's right.
Okay,
so we have to make them.
We have to make them. These litmus tests, whereas, if you want our vote, you have to check this off. Anywhere we can, almost force a check off or something where the whole community knows what they have checked off. You've sent the letter, but just more strategy, something.
Something. Yeah, I personally don't like those checkoff lists because I think that they can lead to unintended consequences, and I think they tend to be simplistic and whatever. But if you're going to do that anyway, if you're a group and you are going to give them a checkoff list, then you need to include some criminal justice issues in that list. But in any event, whatever it is that you do, however it is that you engage with these candidates, you have to include this issue in whatever it is you're engaging them on, because they've made it very clear they're not going to talk about it if we don't make them.
Okay, a couple of more minutes. Race in mass incarceration. And I'm trying to remember the letter, but to me, race is the mass incarceration issue. If you take race out, we don't have a mass incarceration issue.
Yes and no. It is absolutely true that there's a disproportionate impact on the African American community. That's not news. It should be of no surprise. There's no question about that. It is also true that because of the way our system is structured, with the per diem payments to sheriffs, with the financial incentive to keep the jails full, they would find a way to keep the jails full.
Well, I guess my thinking is, and again, if it wasn't the racial issue drives the prison complex, if you remove the racial issue, then the prison complex would shrink. In other words, the way I look at it, white folk getting tied up into a big old net they're throwing out to get black folk.
Well, let's put it this way. I think that if not for the disproportionate impact on the African American community, if the impact were equal, according to the population, there would be a greater push to change it.
Well, we talked about it. That's why same crime, equal time. Nobody would ever vote for that, because then if you started locking up the folk in Metairie at the same rate you lock these other folk up.
Well,
we got to go.
We got to go. Okay.
Done.
You get the last word. Okay.
Oh, my God. is big, so strong, so mighty. My God's plans for me goes beyond my wildest dreams. There's nothing my God cannot do. There's nothing my God cannot do. There's nothing my God